They say that life can change in a heartbeat. But nobody tells you that sometimes, that heartbeat might be your last conscious moment before everything you believed about your family crumbles into dust. My name is Margareth Williams, I'm 54 years old, and I thought I knew my son. I thought I knew the woman he married. I was wrong about everything. The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed were the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes. Sharp, clinical, unforgiving. My head felt like it had been split open and put back together with Scotch tape. The steady beeping of machines filled the silence, and for a moment, I couldn't remember why I was there. Then it all came rushing back, the rain, the intersection, the screech of brakes, and then, nothing. Mom? Oh, thank God, you're awake. Marcus's voice broke through the fog, and I turned my head slowly to see my 32-year-old son sitting beside my bed. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually perfect hair disheveled. Behind him stood Sarah, my daughter-in-law, looking impeccable as always despite the supposed stress of the situation. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. Sarah moved forward with a cup of water, her movements precise and controlled. Small sips, Margareth, she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of barely concealed condescension that I'd learned to ignore over the past 5 years of their marriage. How long? I managed to croak out. 3 days, Marcus said, gripping my hand. 3 days we thought we might lose you. 3 days. I had been unconscious for 3 entire days while life continued around me. The thought made me feel vulnerable in a way I hadn't experienced since I was a child. I looked at Sarah again, studying her face. Something was different about her, something I couldn't quite place. There was a lightness in her expression, almost like relief. The wedding, I said suddenly, remembering something from before the accident. Marcus and Sarah had been planning to renew their vows for their 5th anniversary. It was supposed to be a small ceremony, just family. Did you two go ahead with the ceremony? I know how much you wanted to exchange those vows again. The silence that followed my question was deafening. Marcus looked confused, glancing between me and Sarah. But Sarah's reaction was what caught my attention. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her purse strap, and for just a moment, her composed mask slipped. We exchanged them long ago, she muttered, barely loud enough for me to hear. The words hit me like ice water. There was something in the way she said it, something final and cold that made my chest tighten. Marcus looked at her strangely, as if he hadn't understood her either, but before I could ask what she meant, Dr. James walked into the room. Dr. Richard James was a handsome man in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that seemed to light up when he entered the room. But his attention wasn't focused on me, his patient. Instead, his gaze went straight to Sarah, and I watched as they exchanged a look that lasted just a beat too long. Mrs. Williams, it's wonderful to see you awake, Dr. James said, finally turning his attention to me. You gave us quite a scare. The impact was severe, and we were concerned about potential brain trauma. As he examined me, checking my reflexes and asking standard questions about my memory and orientation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. The way Sarah and Dr. James moved around each other seemed almost choreographed, too familiar. When he handed her my chart to hold, their fingers brushed, and I saw Sarah's cheeks flush slightly. When can I go home? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Let's see how you progress over the next few days, Dr. James replied. Head injuries can be unpredictable. We want to make sure you're completely stable before discharge. After he left, Marcus pulled his chair closer to my bed. Mom, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't asked you to pick up those groceries for the dinner party, you wouldn't have been driving in that storm. The dinner party. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Sarah had been hosting what she called a small gathering for some of Marcus's colleagues. She'd insisted it had to be perfect, down to the specific wine pairing and imported cheese selection. I had volunteered to help with the shopping because, despite our sometimes strained relationship, I wanted to support her efforts to advance Marcus's career. It wasn't your fault, sweetheart, I said, squeezing his hand. Accidents happen. But even as I said the words, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe it wasn't an accident at all. The thought was so disturbing that I immediately tried to push it away. Surely I was just being paranoid because of the head injury. Sarah had been quiet during this exchange, standing by the window and staring out at the parking lot. When she finally turned back to us, her expression was unreadable. "Marcus, we should let your mother rest," she said. "The doctor said she needs sleep to heal properly." My son looked torn between wanting to stay with me and following his wife's suggestion. Sarah's influence over him had always been strong, stronger than I was comfortable with, but I had learned to bite my tongue. Now, lying in this hospital bed, I realized I might not have been cautious enough. "Go ahead, honey," I told Marcus. "I am tired. But promise me you'll come back tomorrow?" "Of course, Mom. I'll be here first thing in the morning." As they prepared to leave, I called out to Sarah. "Thank you for being here. I know this hasn't been easy for you." She turned back, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like guilt flicker across her features. "Of course, Margareth. Family takes care of family." But the way she said family made it sound more like a foreign word she was trying to pronounce correctly. After they left, I lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me. Nurses padding down hallways, distant conversations, the constant electronic symphony of medical equipment. My mind kept returning to Sarah's words, "We exchanged them long ago." The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that she hadn't been talking about their wedding vows. The next morning brought a new nurse, a kind woman named Janet who had worked at the hospital for over 20 years. As she helped me with breakfast, I found myself asking casual questions about the staff. "Dr. James seems very dedicated," I said, testing the waters. Janet smiled. "Oh yes, he's one of our best. Very professional, though there has been some talk lately." She caught herself and shook her head. "I shouldn't gossip. It's not my place." "What kind of talk?" I pressed gently. She looked around nervously, then leaned in slightly. "Well, there's been a woman coming to see him regularly. Not a patient, you understand. Very pretty, well-dressed. The other nurses think she might be someone special, but Dr. James has never mentioned being in a relationship." My heart began to race, but I kept my voice steady. "A regular visitor? That's nice for him. Everyone deserves companionship." "Yes, though it's a bit unusual. She always comes during his shift changes, very discreet. Professional-looking woman, always dressed to the nines." The description could fit a lot of women, but something in my gut told me exactly who Janet was describing. I thanked her for the information and spent the rest of the morning trying to piece together what I was beginning to suspect. When Marcus arrived that afternoon, he seemed more relaxed than he had the day before. Sarah wasn't with him, which gave me an opportunity I'd been hoping for. "Where's Sarah today?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "She had some errands to run. Something about finalizing details for her new job." This was news to me. New job? I didn't know she was looking for work. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "It's been in the works for a while." She didn't want to say anything until it was definite. You know how she is about not counting her chickens before they hatch. That wasn't how I knew Sarah at all. She was typically very vocal about her plans and ambitions. The fact that she'd kept a job search secret struck me as odd, especially given how much she enjoyed discussing her professional achievements. "What kind of position?" I asked. "Something in medical administration, I think. She's been spending a lot of time at various medical facilities, getting familiar with different hospital systems." The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. Medical administration work that required visits to hospitals during specific shift changes. A job search that was kept secret from family. And those meaningful looks between Sarah and Dr. James. "Marcus," I said carefully, "how long has Sarah been looking for this job?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe 6 months. She said she wanted to expand her career options, get more experience in healthcare management." 6 months. That timeline felt significant, though I couldn't yet put my finger on why. Over the next 2 days, I observed everything with new eyes. When Sarah visited, she was always perfectly put together, but there was an energy about her that seemed almost excited. She would check her phone frequently, and once I caught her smiling at a text message in a way that seemed far too intimate for a casual correspondence. Dr. James's bedside manner remained professional, but I started noticing small details. The way he would find reasons to extend conversations when Sarah was in the room. How he would update her on my condition with more detail than seemed necessary for a daughter-in-law. The way they both seemed to know exactly when the other would be present. On my 4th day in the hospital, I pretended to be asleep when I heard voices outside my room. Through the partially open door, I could see Sarah and Dr. James in the hallway, standing closer together than any doctor and patient's family member should. How much longer? Sarah was asking in a low voice. Her recovery is progressing normally. Maybe 2 more days for observation, then she can go home. And then? Then we can move forward with our plans. Are you sure Marcus won't suspect anything? Sarah's laugh was soft but cold. Marcus trusts me completely. He has no idea that I've already started the process. By the time everything is finalized, it will be too late for anyone to stop us. My blood turned to ice. Whatever they were planning, it involved my son's trust being betrayed in the worst possible way. I forced myself to remain perfectly still, to keep my breathing even and natural. What about the financial transfers? Dr. James asked. All handled. I've been slowly moving assets over the past few months. Marcus signed the papers without even reading them properly. He thinks they're just routine investment updates. And Margareth? Do you think she suspects anything? There was a pause, and I could almost feel Sarah's gaze on me through the doorway. She's always been too observant for her own good. But the accident was convenient. It's given us the time we needed to finalize everything. The accident was convenient. The words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. Had my near-death experience been orchestrated? The possibility seemed too monstrous to believe, yet the way Sarah spoke about it suggested that whether intentional or not, she had certainly benefited from my absence. When will you tell Marcus? Dr. James asked. Soon. Once all the legal paperwork is complete and there's nothing he can do to reverse it. I'll present it as a done deal, make it seem like the natural evolution of our relationship. And if he doesn't accept it? Sarah's voice turned harder. He'll have to. By then, he'll have no choice. They moved away down the hallway, their voices fading, but I had heard enough. My daughter-in-law was planning to leave my son, but not before stealing everything she could from him. And Dr. James was her willing accomplice in this betrayal. I lay there for a long time, my mind racing through the implications of what I'd learned. The vows they had exchanged weren't wedding vows with Marcus, they were promises to each other, commitments made in secret while Sarah maintained the facade of being a devoted wife. But what hurt most was the realization that Marcus was completely unaware of what was happening. He trusted Sarah so completely that he was signing documents without reading them, believing her lies about job searches and career development. My protective instincts as a mother kicked into overdrive, but I knew I had to be smart about how I handled this. When Marcus came to visit that evening, I studied his face carefully. He looked tired, more tired than someone his age should look. There were stress lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a few months ago. You look exhausted, sweetheart, I said. Are you getting enough sleep? He rubbed his face with both hands. It's been a lot, Mom. Worrying about you, plus Sarah's been under a lot of stress with the job situation. She's been staying out late some nights, networking events, and such. I've been trying to hold down the fort at home. Networking events? I asked carefully. Yeah, she says it's important for her new career direction. Medical administration is apparently very relationship-driven. She's been building connections with doctors and hospital administrators. The innocent way he explained it broke my heart. He had no idea that his wife's networking was actually an affair with the very doctor who was supposed to be caring for his injured mother. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you been happy lately? I mean, really happy? He was quiet for a long moment, and when he looked at me, I saw something vulnerable in his expression. I don't know, Mom. Sometimes I feel like Sarah and I are living parallel lives instead of a shared one. She's always busy with something, always has somewhere else to be. I keep telling myself it's just a phase, that once she gets settled in her new career, things will get back to normal. When did this phase begin? I guess, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. Right around the time she started talking about wanting to expand her professional horizons. The timeline matched perfectly with what I'd overheard. For over 6 months, Sarah had been planning her exit strategy while Marcus remained blissfully unaware. Has she asked you to sign any papers recently? Investment documents, insurance policies, anything like that? Marcus looked surprised by the question. How did you? Yes, actually. She said she'd found some better investment opportunities, wanted to consolidate our assets for better returns. I signed some papers a couple of weeks ago. Why do you ask? My heart sank. I'm just trying to understand what's been going on while I was unconscious. Sometimes when people are under stress, they make financial decisions quickly. Sarah's always been good with money, Marcus said. Much better than me. I trust her judgment completely. That trust was going to destroy him, and I had to find a way to protect him without seeming like the interfering mother-in-law Sarah had probably already painted me as. The next morning, I asked Janet if I could use her phone to make a private call. I told her I needed to contact my insurance company about the accident, but instead, I called my lawyer. Robert Chen had been handling my legal affairs for over 15 years. He was discreet, thorough, and most importantly, he understood family dynamics from his own experience with a difficult daughter-in-law. Margareth, I heard about your accident. How are you feeling? Physically, I'm fine. But Robert, I need your help with something delicate. I think my son is being financially manipulated by his wife, and I need to understand what my options are. I explained everything I had overheard, being careful to stick to facts rather than speculation. Robert listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. This is serious, Margareth. If assets are being transferred without full disclosure, that could constitute fraud. Do you know what documents Marcus has signed? No, but he mentioned investment consolidation and asset transfers. Robert, I need to know what Sarah has done and whether it can be reversed. I'll need to do some research, but first, I need you to be very careful. If Sarah suspects you know something, she might accelerate her timeline. Can you continue to act normal until I can get some answers? I think so. But Robert, my son has no idea what's happening. He trusts her completely. Then we need to move quickly but quietly. I'll start making some calls today. In the meantime, try to gather any additional information you can without arousing suspicion. After I hung up, I felt both relief and terror. Relief that I was finally taking action, and terror about what we might discover. That afternoon, Sarah visited alone. She seemed different somehow, more confident and almost radiant. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, expensive looking, and there was a piece of jewelry around her neck that definitely wasn't from Marcus's budget. You're looking lovely today, I said, watching her reaction carefully. She touched the necklace unconsciously. Thank you. I thought I'd treat myself to something nice. I've been under so much stress lately. It's beautiful. A gift from Marcus? For just a moment, her composure slipped. No, I bought it for myself. Sometimes a woman needs to do something special for herself, you know? I knew that necklace hadn't been purchased with Marcus's knowledge, just as I was becoming certain that many of Sarah's recent treats were being funded by money that rightfully belonged to my son. How are the job interviews going? I asked. Very well, actually. I think I'll have some good news to share soon. That's wonderful. Marcus will be so proud of you. Something flickered in her eyes when I mentioned Marcus, something that looked almost like guilt. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Margareth, can I ask you something? Of course. do you ever regret the choices you made in life? I mean, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen a different path? The question surprised me with its apparent sincerity. For a moment, Sarah seemed like a different person, younger and more vulnerable. Everyone wonders about the roads not taken, I said carefully. But I've learned that happiness isn't about the path you choose, it's about how you walk the path you're on. She nodded, but I could see that my answer wasn't what she'd been hoping for. What if walking that path means hurting people you care about? Now we were getting somewhere. Sarah, if you're having doubts about something, maybe you should talk to Marcus about it. Marriage is supposed to be about facing difficult decisions together. Her expression hardened again. Some decisions can't be made together. Sometimes one person has to be brave enough to make the hard choice for both of them. The way she said it sent chills down my spine. In Sarah's mind, she wasn't betraying Marcus, she was saving herself from a life she no longer wanted, and she'd convinced herself that leaving him was somehow merciful. That evening, after Sarah left, I called Robert back from Janet's phone. "I've been making inquiries," he said without preamble. "Margareth, this is worse than we thought. In the past 6 months, significant assets have been moved out of accounts that were jointly held by Marcus and Sarah. Property titles have been transferred, investment accounts have been liquidated and moved to new accounts that Sarah controls exclusively. My worst fears were being confirmed." "How much money are we talking about?" "Based on what I can determine, probably close to $200,000. Maybe more. Marcus's entire inheritance from his grandfather, plus their joint savings, plus the equity from their home. $200,000. Marcus's grandfather had left him that money specifically to ensure his future security. It was supposed to be his safety net, his foundation for building a family and a stable life. Can any of it be recovered? That depends on several factors. If we can prove that the transfers were made without Marcus's full knowledge and consent, we might have legal recourse. But Sarah has been very careful about getting his signatures on all the documents. She's made sure everything looks legitimate on paper. What about fraud charges? Possible, but difficult to prove. She could claim that Marcus knew exactly what he was signing, and unless we have evidence to the contrary. What kind of evidence would we need? Recordings of conversations where she admits to deception. Documentation showing that she misrepresented the nature of the documents. Proof that she had no intention of using the money for their joint benefit. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard between Sarah and Dr. James. "Robert, what if I could get a recording of her admitting what she's done?" There was a pause. "Margareth, I have to advise you to be very careful. If Sarah is as calculating as she seems, confronting her could be dangerous. She's already invested too much in this plan to give up easily. But if I don't do something, she's going to destroy my son's life and walk away with everything he has. I understand your concern, but..." "No," I interrupted. "Robert, you don't have children, so you don't understand. There is nothing I wouldn't do to protect Marcus. Nothing." The conversation with Robert crystallized something in my mind. I couldn't just sit back and hope that the legal system would eventually sort everything out. By then, Sarah would be gone, the money would be gone, and Marcus would be left with nothing but the realization that the woman he'd loved and trusted had been planning his destruction for months. I needed proof of Sarah's intentions, and I needed it before she could complete whatever timeline she was working toward. More importantly, I needed Marcus to see the truth for himself, because if this information came from me without concrete evidence, Sarah would find a way to turn it around and make me look like a bitter, interfering mother-in-law. The next morning, I asked Janet if there was a way I could get a small recording device. I told her I wanted to record some thoughts about my recovery from my family, a sort of audio journal. She was sympathetic and offered to have her husband bring me a small digital recorder that evening. While I waited, I began planning how to get Sarah to reveal the truth. I couldn't be too obvious about it, but I needed her to feel comfortable enough to speak freely about her plans. When Marcus visited that afternoon, I could see the strain was wearing on him more heavily. His clothes looked wrinkled, as if he'd slept in them, and there was a defeated quality to his posture that broke my heart. "Sarah's been working late every night this week," he said in response to my question about how things were going at home. She says the job interviews have moved into a final phase, and there are a lot of evening meetings with potential employers. Evening meetings. I was becoming more certain that these meetings were actually extended time with Dr. James, probably planning their future together while Marcus waited at home. Have you two had a chance to talk about your anniversary plans? I asked. Marcus looked confused. Anniversary plans? Your 5th wedding anniversary is next month, isn't it? Oh, right. We haven't really discussed it. Sarah's been so focused on her career transition that I didn't want to add any pressure about party planning. 5 years of marriage, and his wife couldn't be bothered to acknowledge their anniversary because she was too busy planning her exit strategy. The callousness of it was breathtaking. Marcus, do you remember what you said in your wedding vows to Sarah? He smiled for the first time in days. Of course. I promised to love her through better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health. I meant every word. And what did she promise you? His expression grew thoughtful. You know, Mom, I've been thinking about that lately. She promised to support my dreams and be my partner in building our future. But sometimes I wonder if we have the same vision of what that future should look like. If only he knew how different her vision had become. That evening, Janet's husband brought me the small digital recorder. It was tiny, about the size of a USB drive, with excellent sound quality and several hours of recording capacity. Perfect for what I needed to do. I spent the evening planning my approach. I needed to create a situation where Sarah would feel safe revealing her true intentions. The key would be making her believe that I was no longer a threat, that my injuries had left me confused and possibly unreliable as a witness. The next morning, when Sarah arrived for her visit, I was ready. Sarah, sweetheart, I'm so glad you're here. I've been having the strangest thoughts, and I wanted to talk to someone about them. She sat down in the chair beside my bed, and I noticed she seemed more relaxed than usual. What kind of thoughts, Margareth? Well, ever since the accident, I've been having these dreams. Or maybe they're memories, I can't tell the difference anymore. But in them, you and Marcus aren't together anymore. I watched her face carefully. There was a flicker of interest, but she kept her expression neutral. That must be frightening, she said. Head injuries can cause all sorts of confusion. I'm sure once you're fully recovered, these strange thoughts will go away. Maybe, I said, sounding uncertain. But they feel so real. In the dreams, you're with someone else, someone who makes you happier than Marcus ever could. Now I had her attention. She leaned forward slightly, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Margareth, you shouldn't worry about dreams. They're just your brain processing trauma. But what if they're not dreams? What if they're some kind of premonition? I let my voice take on a slightly confused, vulnerable quality, as if the head injury had left me emotionally unstable. What do you mean? Sarah asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity in her voice. I keep seeing you with a doctor. A handsome man with gray hair. You look so happy together, happier than I've seen you in years. Sarah's breath caught slightly, and I knew I'd hit my target. In the dream, you tell me that you and Marcus were never really meant to be together. That you married him because he was safe and stable, but that you always knew you needed something more. Margareth, I think you should rest. These thoughts aren't. Are they thoughts? I interrupted, letting my voice rise slightly as if I was becoming agitated. Or are they the truth? Sarah looked around nervously, probably checking to make sure no one else could overhear us. The recorder in my pocket was capturing every word. Margareth, you're scaring me. Maybe I should call a nurse. No. I said, grabbing her hand. Please, I need to know. In the dream, you tell me that you and the doctor have been planning this for months. That you've already taken care of all the financial arrangements. The color drained from Sarah's face. What are you talking about? The money, Sarah. In the dream, you tell me you've moved all of Marcus's money to accounts that only you can access. You say it was easy because he trusted you so much. For several long moments, Sarah just stared at me, I could practically see her trying to decide whether I was delusional from the head injury or whether I somehow knew the truth. Finally, she made her choice. "Margareth," she said quietly, "what I'm about to tell you has to stay between us. Do you understand?" I nodded eagerly, playing the part of the confused patient who was desperate for clarity. "Your dreams, they're not entirely wrong." My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had been seeing someone else. Dr. James. We fell in love, and we've been trying to figure out how to handle the situation with Marcus. "And the money?" Sarah took a deep breath. I'd been preparing for the possibility that Marcus and I might not be able to work things out. I wanted to make sure I wouldn't be left with nothing if our marriage ended. "So you took his money?" "I protected assets that were legally mine as his wife. Everything I did was perfectly legal. But Marcus doesn't know. Marcus doesn't need to know the details. When the time comes, I'll explain everything to him in a way that minimizes the hurt." I was getting exactly what I needed, but I pressed for more. "When will you tell him about Dr. James?" "Soon. Richard and I are planning to make our relationship public within the next few weeks. Once that happens, there won't be any point in pretending with Marcus anymore." "And you think this is the right thing to do?" Sarah's expression hardened again. "I think people deserve to be happy, Margareth. I married Marcus when I was young and didn't know what I really wanted from life. Now I do. Richard and I are perfect together, and we're not going to waste any more time pretending otherwise." "What about your wedding vows? You promised to love Marcus through better or worse. Those vows were made by a different person. I'm not the same woman who married your son 5 years ago." The coldness in her voice was chilling. She really had convinced herself that her betrayal was justified, that Marcus was simply an obstacle to her happiness that needed to be removed. "Will you at least try to be gentle when you tell him?" Sarah stood up, smoothing her dress. "I'll handle Marcus in whatever way seems best at the time. He's stronger than you think, Margareth. He'll survive this." After she left, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. I had the recording, clear evidence of Sarah's affair and her financial betrayal. But hearing her casual dismissal of my son's feelings, her complete lack of remorse for what she was planning to do to him, filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. This woman had spent 5 years accepting Marcus's love, his trust, his financial support, and his complete devotion. She had allowed him to plan a future with her while she systematically dismantled that future behind his back. And now she planned to discard him like he was nothing more than an inconvenience. I called Robert immediately. "I have a recording," I told him. Sarah admitted everything, the affair, the financial transfers, her plans to leave Marcus. "What do we do now?" "First, we need to get you out of that hospital," Robert said. "If Sarah realizes what you've done, you could be in danger. Is there any way you can be discharged immediately?" "I'll find out. Second, we need to get Marcus somewhere safe while we figure out how to present this information to him. This is going to destroy him, Margareth. We need to be prepared for that." I knew Robert was right. Marcus's entire world was about to collapse, and I was the one who was going to have to detonate the bomb that would destroy everything he believed about his life and his marriage. But as much as it was going to hurt him, I knew that living the lie would hurt him more. Sarah was going to leave him anyway. At least this way, he might be able to recover some of what she'd stolen from him. I managed to convince Dr. James to discharge me that afternoon, citing my need to return to a familiar environment for proper recovery. The irony of him expediting my release wasn't lost on me. He probably wanted me out of the hospital as much as I wanted to leave. Marcus picked me up, and I could see he was relieved to have something normal to focus on. He fussed over making sure I was comfortable in the car, adjusting the seat and checking that my seatbelt wasn't too tight. "Sarah wanted to come with me," he said as we drove toward my house, "but she had another meeting with a potential employer." "She sends her love." "I'm sure she does," I thought bitterly. "Marcus, when we get to my house, I need to talk to you about something important." He glanced at me with concern. "Is everything okay? Are you feeling sick?" "I'm fine physically. But there's something you need to know," and I want you to hear it from me before you hear it from anyone else. Mom, you're scaring me. I know, sweetheart. And I'm sorry for that. But sometimes being scared is better than being fooled. We drove the rest of the way in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Marcus was probably worried about my mental state after the accident. I was worried about what the next few hours were going to do to his mental state. At my house, I made us both coffee and asked Marcus to sit down at the kitchen table. I placed the digital recorder between us, and his eyes fixed on it immediately. What's this about, Mom? Marcus, I need you to listen to something. But before you do, I want you to know that I love you more than anything in this world, and everything I've done has been to protect you. His face went pale. What have you done? I pressed play on the recorder. Sarah's voice filled the kitchen, clear and unmistakable. I have been seeing someone else. Dr. James. We fell in love, and we've been trying to figure out how to handle the situation with Marcus. Marcus froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. As the recording continued, I watched my son's face cycle through disbelief, confusion, hurt, and finally, devastating understanding. When Sarah's voice said, I protected assets that were legally mine as his wife. Everything I did was perfectly legal, Marcus set down his cup with shaking hands. The recording played all the way through to Sarah's final, cold dismissal, he'll survive this. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sat perfectly still, staring at the recorder as if it were a poisonous snake that might strike if he moved. When? He asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. Yesterday. I pretended to be confused from my head injury so she would feel safe telling me the truth. How long have you known? I started suspecting things when I was in the hospital. But Marcus, I only recorded her because I knew you wouldn't believe me without proof. He looked up at me then, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke my heart. She's been planning this for months? According to what she told me, yes. The papers I signed, they weren't investment opportunities, were they? I don't think so. Marcus put his head in his hands and began to cry. Not the controlled, dignified tears of an adult, but the broken, devastated sobs of a child whose world has just been shattered. I moved around the table and held him while he cried, feeling his body shake with the force of his grief. This was my son, my baby, and someone had deliberately broken his heart and stolen his future. I'm so sorry, Marcus, I whispered into his hair. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I loved her, he sobbed. I loved her so much, Mom. I would have given her anything she wanted. Why didn't she just talk to me? That was the question that broke my heart the most. Marcus would have moved mountains for Sarah if she had been honest about her unhappiness. He would have gone to counseling, changed careers, moved to another city, anything to make their marriage work. But she had chosen deception and theft over honesty and communication. Some people are just selfish, sweetheart. Some people take what they want instead of asking for what they need. We sat there for a long time, holding each other while Marcus processed the magnitude of Sarah's betrayal. Eventually, his sobs subsided into quiet tears, and then into a hollow, shocked silence. What do I do now? He asked. Now we fight back, I said firmly. We don't let her destroy your life without consequences. But what if she's right? What if I wasn't enough for her? What if? Stop right there, I interrupted. Margareth Williams, you are one of the kindest, most generous men I know. You worked 2 jobs to put yourself through college. You've never missed a birthday, anniversary, or holiday. You've supported every dream Sarah ever mentioned having. If you weren't enough for her, it's because she's incapable of recognizing what she had. He nodded, but I could see he was still processing the self-doubt that Sarah's betrayal had planted in his mind. I need to see Robert Chin, I continued. We need to understand exactly what Sarah has taken and whether we can get it back. She really took Grandpa's inheritance? Based on what she admitted to me, yes. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. His grandfather had been his hero, a man who had worked his entire life to leave something meaningful for his family. The idea that Sarah had stolen that legacy was finally penetrating through his shock and grief. She knew how important that money was to me. She knew it represented everything Grandpa worked for. I know, honey. And she took it anyway. Yes, she did. For the first time since I'd played the recording, I saw a flash of anger in my son's eyes. It was a start. The next morning, we met with Robert at his office. He had prepared a preliminary analysis of Marcus and Sarah's financial situation, and the news was even worse than I had feared. In total, approximately $230,000 has been moved out of accounts that Marcus had access to, Robert explained. This includes the inheritance, joint savings, and equity from a home refinancing that Marcus apparently signed off on without realizing what it was for. Marcus stared at the papers in front of him. I remember signing those refinancing documents. Sarah said it was to get a better interest rate. Instead, she took the equity and moved it to an account that only she can access, Robert continued. The good news is that with Margareth's recording, we have clear evidence of intentional deception. The bad news is that recovering the money will require legal action, and there's no guarantee we'll be able to recover all of it. What about criminal charges? I asked. Possible, but difficult. Sarah was very careful to get Marcus's signature on everything. She could claim that he knew what he was signing, and it would be his word against hers. Except we have her admission on tape, Marcus said quietly. Exactly. That recording could be crucial in proving that the transfers were made under false pretenses. Over the next several days, we worked with Robert to build a comprehensive case. We gathered bank statements, loan documents, and every piece of paper that Sarah had convinced Marcus to sign over the past several months. The pattern of deception was clear. She had systematically moved every asset she could access while maintaining the pretense of a loving marriage. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to have no idea that her world was about to collapse. She continued her normal routine, coming home late from her meetings, and treating Marcus with the same casual affection she'd shown for months. The ability to maintain such a complete facade was almost sociopathic in its coldness. Marcus, to his credit, managed to act normally around her while we prepared our case. I could see the effort it was costing him. He had lost weight and barely slept, but he understood that confronting Sarah too early would give her an opportunity to cover her tracks or disappear entirely. Robert advised us to wait until all the legal paperwork was prepared before revealing what we knew. We needed to be ready to freeze accounts, file injunctions, and take every possible legal action simultaneously to prevent Sarah from moving any additional money or assets. The waiting was torture for both of us, but especially for Marcus. He had to go to bed next to the woman who was systematically destroying his life, had to kiss her goodbye in the mornings while knowing she was spending her days with another man and planning his financial ruin. I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, he told me one evening when Sarah was at another networking event. Looking back, I can see moments when she seemed distant or distracted. But I just thought she was stressed about work. You trusted your wife, I said. That's what husbands are supposed to do. But maybe I was naive. Maybe I should have paid more attention to what she was actually doing instead of just accepting everything she told me. I understood his need to find some way to blame himself. It was easier to believe that he had failed somehow than to accept that someone he loved had chosen to hurt him so deliberately. But I wasn't going to let him carry that burden. Marcus, Sarah is an adult who made conscious choices to lie to you, steal from you, and cheat on you. None of that is your fault. The fact that you trusted her shows that you're a good person, not a foolish one. 2 weeks after my discharge from the hospital, Robert called to tell us that everything was ready. We'll serve Sarah with papers tomorrow morning, he explained. Simultaneously, we'll file for emergency injunctions to freeze all the accounts she's moved money into. We'll also be filing a police report based on the recording and the evidence of financial fraud. What should I tell Sarah tonight? Marcus asked. Nothing, Robert said firmly. Act completely normal. If she suspects what's coming, she might try to move additional assets or disappear entirely. That night was probably the longest of Marcus's life. Sarah came home late as usual, full of cheerful chatter about her progress with potential employers. She even suggested they plan a weekend getaway to celebrate her anticipated job offer. That sounds wonderful, Marcus managed to say, though I could see the words physically hurt him to speak. The next morning, Sarah left for what she said was a final interview. Marcus and I waited at my house for Robert's call. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. "It's done," Robert said. "Sarah has been served, and the accounts have been frozen. The police will be contacting her later today about the fraud allegations." We had done it. After weeks of careful planning and painful waiting, we had finally turned the tables on Sarah. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt strangely hollow. This wasn't really a victory, it was just damage control after a devastating betrayal. Marcus was sitting quietly at my kitchen table, staring out the window. "How do you feel?" I asked him. "Empty," he said. "I thought I'd feel angry or satisfied or something. But I just feel empty." I understood. For months, we had been focused on gathering evidence and building our case. Now that it was over, we were left with the reality of what Sarah had done and what it meant for Marcus's future. His phone rang around 2 p.m. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Marcus looked at me with panic in his eyes. "Answer it," I said. "You have to face her eventually." He took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Hello, Sarah." Even from across the room, I could hear her voice, high-pitched and frantic. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? There are police officers here asking me questions about fraud, and someone served me with papers saying you're trying to freeze my bank accounts." "Our bank accounts," Marcus said quietly. "The money you moved was supposed to be ours. I can explain everything. This is just a misunderstanding. Can you meet me somewhere so we can talk?" "I don't think there's anything to talk about, Sarah. I know about Dr. James. I know about the money. I know about all of it." There was a long pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was different, harder and more calculating. "Your mother put you up to this, didn't she? She never liked me, and now she's convinced you to destroy our marriage with these ridiculous accusations." I had to admire Marcus for not taking the bait. A week ago, that accusation might have worked on him. "This isn't about my mother," he said. "This is about choices you made. Choices you've been making for months while pretending to be my wife." "I am your wife." "No," Marcus said, and his voice was stronger now. "My wife wouldn't steal from me. My wife wouldn't lie to me every day for months. My wife wouldn't plan to leave me while making me sign away everything my grandfather left me. Marcus, please. Can we just sit down and talk about this like adults? I know this looks bad, but if you'll just listen to me." "I've been listening to you for months, Sarah. The problem is that everything you've been telling me has been a lie." Marcus hung up the phone and immediately turned it off. We both knew Sarah would keep calling, probably for hours, alternating between manipulation, false remorse, and anger. "You did good," I told him. "I don't feel good." "You will. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually you'll feel proud of yourself for standing up to her." Over the next few days, the full scope of Sarah's betrayal became clear. The police investigation revealed that she had been planning her exit strategy for nearly 8 months. Her job interviews were actually meetings with financial advisors and lawyers, helping her figure out how to maximize what she could take from Marcus while minimizing her legal exposure. She had opened new accounts in her name only, transferred funds gradually to avoid triggering automatic alerts, and even taken out a personal loan using Marcus as a co-signer without his knowledge. The woman who had spent 5 years sharing his bed had been treating him like a mark in a long con. But perhaps the most hurtful discovery was a series of text messages between Sarah and Dr. James that the police had recovered. In them, Sarah referred to Marcus as my meal ticket and the safety net, while counting down the days until she could finally be free. When Marcus read those messages, I thought he might break down again. Instead, he just nodded grimly. "At least now I know what I really meant to her," he said. Robert managed to recover about 60% of the stolen money through the court injunctions. The rest had been moved too far through the system to trace effectively. Sarah was facing criminal charges, but plea negotiations were already underway, and it was likely she would receive probation rather than jail time. Dr. James, interestingly, had disappeared from Sarah's life as soon as the scandal broke. Apparently his willingness to participate in an affair didn't extend to dealing with the legal and professional consequences of that affair becoming public. Sarah was left facing the wreckage of her schemes alone. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, since Sarah had little ground to stand on given the evidence of her financial misconduct and adultery. Marcus was able to keep the house and most of his remaining assets, though the legal fees ate up a significant portion of what we had managed to recover. 6 months after that horrible day in the hospital, Marcus was officially divorced and trying to rebuild his life. The process had been painful and exhausting, but I could see him getting stronger every day. I keep thinking about what she said in the hospital, he told me one evening as we were having dinner at my house. About exchanging vows long ago. She was talking about promises she made to Dr. James, wasn't she? I think so. It's strange to think that while I was planning our future, she was planning her escape from it. But you survived it, I pointed out. She thought you would be destroyed by what she did, but you're stronger than she ever gave you credit for. Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from him since the day I played that recording. I had help, he said. If you hadn't figured out what she was doing, you would have figured it out eventually. Sarah wasn't as clever as she thought she was. Maybe. But by then, she might have taken everything and disappeared. You saved me, Mom. I had saved him, but the cost had been enormous. My son had lost his faith in love, his trust in marriage, and his financial security. Sarah's betrayal had aged him in ways that broke my heart to see. But he had also gained something valuable, the knowledge that he was stronger than he'd ever realized, and the certainty that his family would always have his back when the world tried to destroy him. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another city and was working as a medical administrator at a small clinic. Dr. James had ended their relationship as soon as it became a liability, and she was apparently struggling both financially and professionally. The criminal charges had resulted in probation and community service, but they had also made it difficult for her to find employment in her chosen field. I tried not to feel satisfaction at her downfall, but I wasn't entirely successful. She had tried to destroy my son's life for her own selfish gain, and she had paid a price for that choice. It wasn't the revenge I might have planned, but it was justice nonetheless. One evening, almost a year after the hospital incident, Marcus brought me a letter that had arrived at his house. It was from Sarah. Do you want me to read it? I asked. Would you? I'm not sure I'm ready to hear what she has to say. I opened the envelope and read the letter silently first. It was 2 pages of what appeared to be genuine remorse, acknowledging the pain she had caused and asking for forgiveness. She claimed to have realized that her actions had been selfish and wrong, and she wanted Marcus to know that she was sorry for everything she had put him through. What does it say? Marcus asked. I looked at my son, this good man who had been through so much pain and was finally starting to heal. Then I looked at the letter again, with its carefully crafted phrases and calculated humility. It says she's sorry, I told him. But Marcus, anyone can write words on paper. The question is whether you believe she means them, and whether it matters if she does. He thought about it for a long moment. I think I don't need her apology. I've already forgiven her, not because she deserves it, but because carrying anger was hurting me more than it was hurting her. I was proud of him in that moment, prouder than I'd ever been. He had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to him and used it to become a better, wiser person. What do you want to do with the letter? I asked. Throw it away, he said without hesitation. I don't need to hear from her again. I tossed the letter into my fireplace and watched it burn. Sarah's words, like her promises, turned to ash and disappeared up the chimney. 6 months later, Marcus started dating again. A colleague had introduced him to Lisa, a divorced teacher with 2 young children. She was kind and honest and had been through her own painful betrayal. They understood each other in ways that people who haven't been deeply hurt often can't. Watching Marcus learn to trust again, to open his heart to the possibility of love after what Sarah had done to him, was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever witnessed. He was cautious but not closed off, protective but not paranoid. When he brought Lisa to meet me, I could see immediately why he was drawn to her. She had the same genuine warmth that had attracted me to Marcus's father all those years ago. But more importantly, I could see in her eyes that she understood the value of what Marcus was offering her, his heart, his trust, his commitment to building something real and lasting. "She's wonderful," I told him after Lisa left that first evening. "She is," he agreed. "And Mom, she knows everything about what happened with Sarah." I told her the whole story because I didn't want there to be any secrets between us. "How did she react?" "She said it made her respect me more, not less. She said anyone who could survive that kind of betrayal and still be willing to love again was someone worth loving." Lisa was right. Marcus had been tested in the worst possible way and had emerged with his fundamental decency intact. He had every right to become bitter and cynical, but instead he had chosen to remain open to hope. 2 years after Sarah's betrayal was exposed, Marcus and Lisa were married in a small ceremony in my backyard. As I watched my son exchange vows with a woman who truly deserved them, I thought about Sarah's words in the hospital. "We exchanged them long ago." She had been right, in a way. She and Marcus had exchanged something long ago, not the vows of love and commitment that he thought they were sharing, but something far more significant. He had given her his trust, his devotion, and his financial security. In return, she had given him the greatest gift of all, though she never intended it, the knowledge of his own strength and the certainty of his own worth. Marcus's real vows, the ones that mattered, weren't the ones he had spoken to Sarah 5 years earlier. They were the promises he was making now to Lisa, with full knowledge of what love could cost and what betrayal could teach. These vows were informed by experience, tempered by wisdom, and backed by a strength he hadn't known he possessed. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that protecting your children doesn't end when they become adults. Sometimes it means making hard choices, taking risks, and doing things that seem manipulative or underhanded. Sometimes being a good mother means being willing to be seen as the villain if that's what it takes to save your child from destruction. I had recorded Sarah's confession not because I enjoyed being deceptive, but because I knew my son would never believe the truth without proof. I had manipulated her into revealing her plans not because I'm naturally cunning, but because I would do anything to protect Marcus from further harm. The day I woke up in that hospital bed, I thought my biggest concern was recovering from my injuries. I had no idea that I was about to uncover a betrayal that would test everything I believed about love, family, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her child. Sarah had meant those words in the hospital as a dismissal, a way of brushing off what she saw as an old woman's irrelevant concerns about traditional marriage ceremonies. She thought she was talking about private promises made to her lover, vows that superseded her legal and moral obligations to my son. But in the end, the most important vows exchanged in this whole sorry mess were the ones between Marcus and me, the unspoken promises that bind a mother and child together. I vowed to protect him, no matter the cost to myself. He vowed to trust me, even when it meant accepting painful truths about someone he loved. Those were the vows that really mattered. Those were the promises that saved us both. If you've ever felt like something wasn't right in your family, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone you love, I want you to know that you're not alone. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest, and sometimes the only way to stop them is to be braver than we ever thought we could be. Trust your instincts. Protect the people you love. And remember that surviving betrayal doesn't make you bitter, it makes you wise. Marcus is living proof of that truth, and every day I see him choosing hope over fear, love over suspicion, and trust over cynicism, I'm reminded that we made the right choice. The vows we never spoke out loud, the promises between mother and son to stand by each other no matter what, those turned out to be stronger than any wedding ceremony. And unlike Sarah's whispered promises to her lover, our vows have stood the test of time. Some promises are meant to be broken. Others are meant to last forever. The difference is in the heart of the person making them, and the love that backs them up. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it well. And now, watching him build a new life with someone who truly deserves his love, I know that Sarah's betrayal, as painful as it was, led him exactly where he needed to be. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted helps you find everything you actually need. And sometimes, when someone whispers, "We exchanged them long ago," they're telling you more truth than they realize, just not the truth they think they're telling. The vows that matter most are the ones we keep, not the ones we break. And in the end, that's what saved us all.